inspiration, and education. In this conversation, what I hope to do is find with JR Rennie, a person who has had a very interesting background, and he's the founder of BrushFires Ministry. And what he has done in this conversation, I hope that what you can find is those people who may have a calling in life. And this is an important thing for all of us to find. And this conversation share something in you, a desire for clarity, purpose, or a message that you need to bring to the world. Please reach out to John. And of course, I'm always available for my exclusive book coaching program. If you're thinking about turning your voice into a book, my door is always open to you. With that, I want to welcome John to the program. How are you doing today, John?
Oh, Mick, I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise, and I couldn't wait to get you on here for so many reasons, but you've got such a compelling story. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get into this ministry in the first place?
Well, I've been a programmer by trade since the late 70s. And in 1987, I started a software development business with a friend of mine. And that was working great. And we were going into 2014, and there was a situation with an employee. By the end of 2015, we had lost 2/3 of our revenue because of this employee-related situation, and we had suffered our first and only significant loss in 30 years of being in business.
Wow.
And going into 2016, I was left with this dilemma of, all right, I can't sustain this loss. I can either close the business, leave my employees high and dry, my clients throughout North America without any support, or I could cut all expenses, which unfortunately included all of my compensation at the time. And so I decided the right thing to do was to, stop taking a paycheck and keep the business running. The problem with that is that I was also doing the sales and marketing, and I couldn't go to another business owner and try to sell our software if I didn't know if I was going to be in business in 6 months to 9 months.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do any sales presentations. And I then came to the conclusion, all right, well, I got to find a way to create a soft landing for my employees and for my customers. And so I just kept things going for the company and went off in different directions for consulting opportunities. Nothing came about. In May of 2016, after every door being slammed in my face, as far as generating other income, I was sitting in a chair that I'm looking at right now going, all right, God, I know you're behind this. What do you want? And it wasn't as if I heard him chuckle, but I kind of felt he did. It was like, oh, good, I got your attention. And it was about 4 months later where he led me to a training on understanding psychometric assessments. Now, believe me, this is completely out of my professional career or anything. And in fact, the gentleman that approached me, I told him no. I go, hey, dude, I just got 9-10 months without a paycheck. Yeah. I'm not going to spend money on your training program because it wasn't cheap. And I left that meeting and went back home. And all of a sudden I felt this pull, do it. And at this point, God had kind of broken me down. It's like, all right, whatever you want me to do, fine. Because you're making your point. I'm really vulnerable here. Do it. I go, this makes no sense. Do it. So I started going into the training, which actually wound up lasting almost a year, because I found my ability to be able to understand it. It was like coding to me. It was like understanding how people are put together. Much like I would put together a manufacturing package or an inventory control package. I could see how all the pieces fit together uniquely in the individual. And during that process, God gave me the epiphany, I want this for the church. Now understand, this was being taught from a secular perspective. Large multinational organizations use these psychometric assessments like like Coca-Cola and IBM. And God's going, I want that for the church. I go, good, you do that. And a year later, after having that blowout with God, I was sitting there going over my purpose statement, which is a byproduct of that training. And it reads like this: I must strategically lead a gifted team to embrace the power of their God-given design for long-term positive results.
Wow.
Well, that first part, I must strategically lead. Okay, I've been leading since I was in my 18, 19 years old. I've always been in leadership, even when I don't want it. Long-term positive results. I'm always, I'm not a short-term goals type of person. It's more like I want something to have value and for it to last and have a significant impact. That's how I wrote, our software to be scalable and things like that. So I got,
Hmm.
okay, I get that. But that middle section, get people to embrace the power of their God-given design. And he'd already told me he wanted for the church. Well, the
Mm.
God-given design, he just took me through this psychometric assessment training. So I go, all right, I understand that. But how am I going to get your church, which doesn't agree on anything, from the color of the carpet to the density of the cushions on the,
Sure.
on a chair, how am I going to get them to embrace it? And that's when he said, basically prompted me, he goes, you're going to write the curriculum. I go, I am. But then I said, I am. And as soon as I said that, Mick, he gave me the name of the ministry. He called it, he says, and it's going to be called BrushFires Ministry. So, and this is the really odd thing. And this is what I want people to understand about your God-given calling.
Mm.
So I'd never written a book before. I wrote a programming manual in the 80s, and that was fine. But that was never something that I was looking to do professionally. I wrote in 2016. I wrote a lot of short stories and poems and poetry. I even wrote a couple of skits and plays, and they were all cathartic, because I was going through a really difficult time,
Sure.
and they were more for me than anything else. But to write something like this and actually have it published and all that was not part of my DNA. Anyhow, I thought, well, you know what? I've got a file folder of things that I've written in the past and messages that I've given at church and things of that nature. Let me pull that out.
Mm.
And I am not exaggerating. I pulled out that folder and I started reviewing the articles and the devotions and all the things. And then I looked at it and go, that's chapter 1. That's chapter
Mm.
2. That's chapter 3. I'd literally, not even knowing it, God had been writing the ministry
I see.
and the workshop materials through my life for over 20 years.
And
And
that's what I find fascinating is that, I don't want to interrupt you, but you're not a
no,
writer, but actually you are. And then what I found so impressive is that you didn't stop there. You got more than just that at the beginning. You had other books, other things.
yeah, that was the very first one. And we released the first live workshop in February of 2018. And we used those materials over and over again. And then that caused us to need to train people. So our graduate training
Okay.
materials were developed from that. As well as our mentoring manual. Earlier this year, I wrote a communication and team building because of speaking at organizations and ministries to help them deal with unity in their grouping or in their groups. And so all that came together. And then towards the end of last year, he says, I want you to write another book. And all
Mm.
these others were all connected to the ministry, and they were workbooks. They were like, all right, if you're going to go through this training of a design, you need the workshop workbook. If you're going to go through leadership design training where you can use this in counseling or coaching or ministry, you need to go through the graduate training workbook. But all that was sort of like practical. The
Mm.
Sparks book was completely different. And as soon as he prompted me to do it, it was like, no, I don't want to do that. Because I knew he wanted me to share some really personal things in there, very, very
Sure.
personal. And I didn't want to do it. And this is how the conversation with God went. All right. Well, you remember the last time you told me no? Yeah, that was when you asked me to do that psychometric training. How'd that work out for you?
Mm.
All right. I'll write the book.
Yeah.
So I wrote it. It's been released on our website, and it's free to anybody that registers on our site. The Amazon version should be released before the end of the year. I've got
Okay.
all my edits back from my editor. I just need to get it uploaded or actually implemented and then uploaded. But it's ready to go. I just need to make time to get it done. But the Sparks book was like, all right, everything else that I've written was academic, if you will. It was training materials. This was like letting people into your deepest, darkest moments, like,
Yeah.
the fact that my wife and I had an abortion before we were married. Something as a Christian later on wound up really being an issue for me. Dreams that God's given me that I had only shared with a handful of people in 20
Mm,
some years. And so these things all were part of that. And that's why I told him no originally, because I just didn't want to.
sure.
I didn't want to be exposed that way, And,
Yeah.
my wife's, and I had my wife's permission to share all these stories, but she says, thanks a lot. Every time I walk into church now, I feel like I'm naked. But it's for his purposes. I figure he knows what he's
Yeah.
doing.
And you end up being prolific because it's a lot of writing. I'm curious, with a busy schedule, where do you find and when do you find time to write? And do you have a pattern, or what's that writing process like for you?
That is actually the hardest part, is the understanding of what I'm writing about, for the most part, is there. There's a little bit of research, but most of it is from practical firsthand experiences. But writing is a lot like doing deep coding. You have to be able to sink into the
Mm,
moment. In our communications team building book, I talk about respectful interruptions. And I try to explain people, when
yeah.
I am programming, I've got all these registers in my head of all these different pieces that are necessary to accomplish the goal. And when somebody comes in and asks a simple question, I start dropping those registers. And
Mm,
after they've left with their little interruption, I have to then pick up all those pieces and get back into that moment.
yeah.
So, so for me, I tend to do a lot of writing in the evening
Okay.
when my wife's watching TV. She doesn't have a whole lot of questions, and I can catch myself writing till midnight to 2 in the morning. I get up all stiff. It's like, oh, it was easier to do in my 20s than
Yeah.
it is in my 60s. But if I catch myself in that moment, so I have to be mentally ready to do it.
Mm,
Right now, I'm in the middle of writing my seventh book, which is Why Discipleship Isn't Working, and it's a struggle to find the time to be able to do it. But I know when it happens, it comes out very it's
mm,
very fluid, and comes out without a whole lot of effort. As far as I'm not struggling to come up with an idea or writer's block or anything like that.
mm.
So it's really that I have to get into that headspace of not having interruptions. I'll have Christian music going on with my, earphones in, so that the TV doesn't distract me or anything like that. And I just, start pouring into it. And every once in a while, if it's something really deep, I'll turn off the music and I'll just start thinking about it and trying to work my head around how I want to say something. But for the most part, it is all right. This is what I'm writing about. I'm writing a section right now on humility and submission, and it's part of our spiritual disciplines section of the book. And
Mm,
the interesting thing is that it came up in a conversation with my wife as we're talking about design and how to get people to understand how important design is. And she said, well, they have to be humble enough to not think that their perspective on this world is not the only one. And I thought, oh, that has to be in the book.
yeah.
So originally I was going to go into the personal disciplines, because I'm thinking you have to, and they're going, no, nobody can personally discipline themselves to be humble. That's a
Yeah.
gift of the Spirit. So then it got into the spiritual discipline section. And then I'm looking at it, I'm going, yeah, all these other disciplines, until you're humble enough and willing to submit yourself to God, they're not. So it wound up going to the number one position. And that's what I'm working on right now as far as that section of the book. So.
Interesting in that the writing process, that you have to come about and find it a space for it, because other people might struggle with that. It's important to hear. So if a person is an aspiring writer, they know that even the prolific person like yourself has to go through some sort of process. And I wanted to touch on this whole idea of whether to release on Amazon, and the whole question that a lot of writers or potential authors are thinking about: self-publishing, hybrid, traditional. What was your thought process when it came to that?
Well, I had the very first book was ghostwritten with one of our graduates of our program, and so we actually collaborated together on that very first one. Because I was busy developing the ministry and doing other things. And so she took my very detailed speaking notes and put them into
Okay.
the book form. And she had released through Amazon, so she kind of already knew that path. I had to learn a number of things, like if you want to make any money on your Amazon book and you're not, Oprah Winfrey or something like that, you actually have to sell them yourself.
Okay.
If you the margins that you actually get through Amazon are so slim if you let them sell the book.
Hmm.
So it's better for you to buy 20, 30, 100 copies and then sell them directly to your friend, because your margin doubles basically. And I just didn't know any better. And part of it, as far as, having a publisher outside of Amazon, it was like, all right, well, I don't know any publishers. I don't feel like going out there pitching this. I'm using this as a part of what we offer through our ministry. So
Mhm.
I already have a bit of a captive audience of people that want to know more. And
Okay.
this is the only place that they can get these materials is through us directly. So we've kind of took that approach. But if there's any publishers out there that want to sign me up, then give me a call.
Well, you're
It would
building.
I would much rather give the money to a publisher than to Amazon, to be quite
Y-
honest.
Yeah, and you're publishing a lot. So, I mean, that's another hint that authors can actually do. Don't just do one thing and work with somebody else, like you said on the first book. But I'm really kind of fascinated if you could tell us a little bit about Christian ministry in general, because let's see, where's the church today and what's motivating you in your own ministry? And what do you see? Like, what do you think that the church is being called to currently?
Well, one of the things that they've really dropped the ball, and this is throughout my lifetime, and I'm 66, is discipleship. The
Yeah.
evangelism thing, the church is doing a decent job of, but discipleship, the one-on-one mentoring of an individual, that's just not happening. I've talked to
Mm,
many men and people of my age and asked them, "Have you been discipled?" Most of them will say no, flat out. And these are men that are considered strong Christian believers.
mm,
Or they will mention something, yeah, I had a really good teacher that taught me this, but not somebody that's actually going to be available to give you counsel, to mentor you, to kind of hold you. There's a a switch that happened in society at some point where we went from a vocation, a calling, to a career. And
mm.
in a vocation calling, it was like, what opportunities are around you? Okay, you're a big guy and there's a blacksmith in the community, and he thinks that you would do good at this work. And you went to him and you apprenticed as a blacksmith, and they taught you how to do that, and you
Sure.
eventually became good at what you were doing. But that was because that person was there side by side, watching you and correcting you and helping you through that process.
Right.
What we do is we say, all right, I'm going to be a doctor. Okay. Why? Well, because they make lots of money, or they're, respected, or this or that, or my parents are doctors. And so therefore that's what I'll do. There's no sense of a calling. What is it that God created you to do?
Mm,
And that's where discipling really is desperately needed, because there's a way through our design assessments to be able to discover how God created you. What is it that he wants to do in you? And then let's start making our choices about career or a ministry based upon our calling. There, there's a white paper that's connected to our assessments, and the assessments are called the
okay.
Why Am I assessments. And this was done as part of the certification process of being certified as a psychometric assessment. Third-party testing has to happen for you to get that certification. And in the end of this, now this is done at a secular college, so it really fascinated me that they came to this conclusion.
Yeah.
They said that education and training that is outside of your design attributes, your interests, abilities, and values, is meaningless. It doesn't bear any real fruit. But education and training that is consistent with your interests, abilities, and values, which our assessments measure, can develop great returns. So what they're saying is that we've got the cart before the horse. Let's figure
Mm,
out what our calling is and then get training in that direction. as
Okay.
opposed to, oh, that's my career and I'll get training to do that. You get so many people that are absolutely miserable in life in what they're doing because they're doing what they were not created to do, and it's
Hmm.
running against their God-given design.
And it reminds me of the verse. It's a people have milk, and where's the substance? And that really does come down to discipleship. And we've chatted before. I said it reminds me of when things are crystal clear for a person like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who wrote The Cost of Discipleship. He talked about cheap grace. Like, no, you have to actually do something and really be a disciple of Jesus Christ.
Right. Well, and here's it's a win-win situation because
Yeah.
okay, so prior to starting the ministry, I was in the corporate world, and I really enjoyed the figure set, income and all that. That part was good, and I did a lot of good and helped a lot of businesses throughout North America. But I had gotten to a place where I was so frustrated with what I was doing because
Mm.
it was just redundant. I was saying the same thing in every sales presentation. It was sucking all the creative parts
Yeah.
out of me. And there was nothing left. I had reinvented the company 3 times at that point. So part of me, when this all came about, this call to ministry, was like, yeah, I'm kind of done with that. God, do you have something better for me? And he led me based upon my purpose statement into what it is
Mhm.
that he wants to do through my life. And that has excited me beyond anything else. This version that people are seeing right now, you might have seen this version in my, late 20s, early 30s when I was just starting the software company and I was really excited about what we're doing. But man, that was not me at 55. I
Okay.
was tapped out. I was just drained of all that. And now I'm actually experiencing the fruit of the spirit. I- let me share the story if I could with you,
Yeah.
Nick,
Yeah.
because this just happened recently and it was really life changing. So any believer understands the gifts of the spirits. It's in
Mhm.
Galatians 5:22-23, and it's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. These are all things that every human being needs. I don't care if you're a believer or non-believer.
Sure.
Okay? They're things that you need. Who does not need love, joy, and peace? And we think we know what it looks like,
Hmm.
and we don't. And God proved it to me. I was asked to speak at a retreat, and I put together that 6-book communication team building in a record amount of time to get to them so that they had something, and that's what we talked about. And it went really well, and I felt that God really used me. And the next morning I woke up at the retreat and all the members of the retreat were busy doing their stuff and I wasn't scheduled to speak anymore. And so I just did my normal routine and I started to sense this sense of peace over, just coming over and go, man, this is very cool. I left the retreat and it was about 2 or 3 hour drive. And I was going to stop for breakfast at some place on the road. And as I'm driving home, I'm feeling the sense of peace grow and grow and grow. I'm going, this is really cool. I stop off at this little restaurant and I asked to be seated outside. And the waitress forgot I was out there. So, not a problem. I'm just sitting there, just enjoying the sunshine. All of a sudden, about 20 minutes later, she comes out apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry, and so forth. My reaction was not, "Oh, it's about time you got here," or,
Yeah.
you should be. It was like, I was immediately concerned about her anxiousness, her anxiety, her sense of, "Oh, he's gonna be upset and mad at me." I was like, "No, no, no, it's all good." I went out there, had breakfast, left there, and as I was leaving, the thought popped in my head, "This is the best version of you."
Hmm.
That sense of peace, the ability to be able to walk through that morning, that sense of peace lasted about 4 hours.
Yeah.
And to be able to go through life with that sense of peace. My in my definition of peace prior to that was lack of trials, lack of anxiety,
Yeah.
lack of medical challenges and so forth that our family has had to deal with. And I go, no, peace is a lot more than that. Peace is something tangible. Peace is something that brings out the best version of you. And it is a gift that God wants to give to his obedient children. That's why it's called a gift of the Spirit. It's the fruit. It's something that nourishes your soul. We feed our body all the time, oxygen, water, food. Our souls need to be nourished, but the only things that can truly nourish it are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. That's what actually nourishes our soul. And I got a heaping tablespoon of it that Sunday morning. And I'm going, this is worth it.
And, this is what I find so fascinating, because in one way, people could say you've given up a lot, right? A successful career, the big salary, and all of that. However, this is the peace that passes all understanding. Not only are you giving up something, but you're gaining so much more. And what you're saying, the fruits of the Spirit, peace, love, and joy.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, there is no substitute for that. Okay, the paychecks were great with the business. That's about the only part of that I miss, because my identity has completely shifted into what it is that God's doing for me now. And but short of that, it's like this is so much more valuable and worthy. When I help a person discover their purpose and their calling, and I come up with their purpose statement, I know that God is working through me, that I'm doing something that it has eternal significance in that person's life. I feel his presence during the process. I'm telling you, for those of your listeners that are coming from a Christian perspective, what we have settled for in our Christian relationship is far short of what God has for us. He has a lot more that he wants to give. And we have settled for breadcrumbs, and he has a 5-course meal waiting for us to taste. And peace is one of them. Joy was what I was seeking when I started the ministry. It was like I wrote an article called "What is Joy?" and I was seeking that. But man, all these other things. Here's another one. So being a business owner, working in corporate areas, you have to have a thick skin, and you have to be willing to take some punches, and you have to be willing occasionally to give some punches.
Sure.
So a lot of people would have described me as a type A personality, which is actually not true, but I faked it pretty well. One of our volunteers had purchased a package of our assessments because she had gone through our leadership training and wanted to give it to her parents to understand her family better. And so she said, "Hey, would you mind talking to me about the results?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Come before class and we'll talk about it." So she did, and I was looking at them. I told her what I saw, and and she's okay. That makes a lot of sense, knowing my dad or knowing my mom and so forth. And then at the end, she looks at me and she goes, "JR, you're just so kind and gentle and patient." Okay, Mick, you need to understand. Okay, I turned around to see who she was talking to, because nobody has ever described me like that. I would never have used those words. But in that moment, what I was doing and what I was helping her with, the Holy Spirit was working through me. And so that's what she experienced. So it will change who you are. I don't care how you are, especially for leaders. Leaders need to understand this. Your leadership calling that you are using in business, nothing wrong with that. Okay. But my leadership ability in my software business has funded our ministry all this time. Okay. That matters. But when you do it for God, the dividends are so much more valuable.
And that's what I'm hearing, and that's what I'm seeing. And that's the beautiful thing about where you're actually finding out what God has entailed for you. As we start to wind up, you've talked about your books and the ministry, and people have had a chance to hear you. So please tell us where we can get a hold of you. What can you do for people reach out, and where can they get the books that you have written?
Well, we have 2 websites, but the ones that they want to focus in on is brushfires-digital.com. That's our teaching website, and that is the one that actually has our video series for the design workshop. It has the assessments and our books and all that. It's if they go there, it's free to register. We don't ask for any, credit card or payment information. You can register for free. You'll get that Sparks book, currently in its unedited version, but shortly, hopefully in the next month or so, the fully edited version will be up. But you get it for free. I just give that as a gift because I know God is using it in people's lives to encourage them. You'll get one of our assessments for free. The spiritual gifts assessment from Romans 12 is always free. And then you can check out to see if you want to do one of our packages. Most people are going with the gold or the platinum package. And that's where we have you go through the video series to understand design, the assessments to understand your design, the very first book that we released, the workshop workbook, as well as a 3-hour coaching session at the end where you'll be able to actually get your purpose statement. It's live. We don't use AI and any of that stuff. It's actually person to person, and we help you discover your purpose.
So many resources.
Well, there is. And plus, that's also where the discipleship framework, which that 7th book, Why Discipleship Isn't Working, it will be released exclusively on that site for people to be able to get.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you. So thanks for mentioning that, because that's the upcoming attraction. John, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your insights on both your personal life, and it's very personal and can be very emotional. So I appreciate that. And also the words of wisdom that you have for the church. It's a very needed message today. Thank you very much. Very much.
Oh, Mick, it's been a pleasure. I hope your audience got something out of this, and all the best to you and your family.
Thank you so much. Take care. I'm always inspired, and I'm certainly inspired by John and his story and what he's been done. I also want to thank all those who have supported the program, the Doctor of Digital podcast. That is the publishers of both Burning America and On Track, Ian Hunter, for their continued support of the program. If you've learned anything, hopefully you'll reach out to me as well. Be a subscriber to the Doctor of Digital podcast. Thank you for all your time, your listening. Until next time, this is the Doctor of Digital signing off. Deus Volt.